On September 7, 2013, SRUTI presented Roopa Mahadevan accompanied by Arun Ramamurthy and Rajna Swaminathan during its Composers' Day celebrations. Roopa Mahadevan is one of the promising upcoming Carnatic vocalists. She underwent her major training under Srimati Asha Ramesh in San Jose, California. In 2007, Roopa was awarded the prestigious Fulbright Scholarship to receive advanced training in Chennai under Vidushi Suguna Varadachari, a senior student of Musuri Subramanya Iyer. In 2010, Roopa was given the title Kala Ratna by the Cleveland Tyagaraja Aradhana for her commitment to Carnatic music as a young American. She's been a regular performer in all of the major sabhas during the Chennai music season. Arun Ramamurthy is an exciting violinist who brings many new dimensions to Carnatic music through his Carnatic training as well as his Western classical training. His first guru was Sri Ananthakrishnan, who taught him not only Carnatic music, but also a sense of tradition and musical appreciation based on a rigorous discipline. He later received guidance from the popular Sri Mysore Nagaraj and Dr. Mysore Manjunath. He is currently very active in promoting Carnatic music to American audiences. Rajna Swaminathan is an accomplished young mridangam artist. She received her initial training from her father, Dr. P.K. Swaminathan, and then came under the direct tutelage of Sri Umayalpuram K. Shivaraman. She debuted in the Chennai music season in 2005 and proceeded to be the youngest and first female to receive the Best Junior Mridangam Artist from Music Academy in 2007. She continues to perform regularly with vocal as well as dance performances and also gives lecture demonstrations. You grew up in an Indian family and immersed in an Indian culture inside the home, but once you stepped out, it was a completely different atmosphere. So it's obviously not the same as growing up in India and learning music in that environment. Was it an advantage or a detriment in some sense to learn music in America?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think having a family that prioritized art in general. I also learned Bharatanatyam, so be it Bharatanatyam or Carnatic music, drama. I mean, my parents were very involved in the local arts community, and so I think that really helped in terms of exposing me. So they would take me to a lot of concerts, introduce me to senior artists, have me sing in front of them, get their feedback. My dad would quiz me on ragas on the way to school, things like that. So it was never for me this a reach, you know, it was kind of around me all the time. There'd be music playing in the house and so forth. Artists would come and stay with us on tour from India. So I think I was lucky to be in that kind of environment growing up. And you're right, it is a challenge to have such a wholesome experience at home in that sense, and then walk outside and be kind of introduced to all kinds of other things. I actually see it as an advantage more than a disadvantage. I think it allows you to kind of experiment with other music styles as well. So like in high school, I was in a choir, I did like musicals, you know, Showtime type stuff. And I actually feel like that gives you a certain kind of confidence as well. And aesthetically too, it opens your mind up to different ways of thinking about melody and rhythm and performance, right? So I actually see that as a good thing for me personally. And I also think we didn't take for granted what we were getting. So a lot of my cousins in India, you know, Carnatic music's all around them, so they don't necessarily put in that extra effort to actually try to commit or like put in the extra hours of practice. So I think because it's a scarcer resource here, that we're even more conscious of that and try to like overcompensate in some ways. So.
How about in school? Did you guys like talk to your friends about it? Like ever introduce them to Carnatic music, because that's totally different than what they hear?
Yeah, it's a funny question because I definitely didn't. Nobody really knew. They knew I played violin, but it wasn't necessarily knew I played Carnatic music. As a boy growing up playing football and basketball and all that stuff, playing the violin wasn't the coolest thing. So I didn't necessarily.
You're cool now, Arun.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I've been working very hard at that. But yeah, I didn't talk much about playing Carnatic music. It wasn't.
Your dark secret.
Yeah, it was just something I kind of did on the side, but it was separate than kind of the other life, right? I would go to school and about influences. I grew up listening to Carnatic music in a house very much like Roopa's. My parents were also organizers. We had musicians from India coming and staying in our house, so we were kind of around that. It was part of my upbringing. But part of my upbringing was also, listening to Pearl Jam, the Wu-Tang Clan, and I was really into hip hop. I was really into a lot of other styles of music, and I didn't realize until later in life that was going to benefit me. I didn't realize. I knew that I liked it and I connected with it the same way, a white person or a Chinese person or whoever who's born in America, the same way we all are American. It was something that I related to. Only later, I think, when musically and as a musician I got to a point where I was improvising and in a place where I was, I guess, able to take my music, make it internal, and then start to experiment and try to see what else is out there, where I allow those influences to kind of take shape inside of me, right? I think that's when you realize the benefit of growing up here. And for me personally, it took a little while, My musical experiences were very separated. So like when I was in high school, I learned from a guru, and it was really traditional. I would go there once a week, but he was strict, and but he was an incredible teacher. And he was incredible in a lot of ways, and he would also relate Carnatic music concepts to the Chicago Bulls and what they were doing in the NBA Finals, right? Like he loved basketball, he knew I did, so he'd figure out ways to get it across to me, right? But with that said, it was all very musical. It was about music, and I learned it in a very pure form. At home, I practiced in a pure way. So I think that, I don't feel like we missed that by growing up in America. I think you can easily get it if the parents give that sort of atmosphere. But then when we go out, we are also exposed to all these other things, which is nothing but a benefit, if you ask me. I don't know, Rajna,
I have one more thought I just want to add on that real quick.
Yeah.
When we're singing other kinds of, well, in my case singing, but doing other kinds of music, I actually found that the Carnatic training actually helped me see my potential in other genres. So when I listen to like Mariah Carey singing R&B, in some ways I think of what she's doing as like sangatis. I mean, it's like, the trills and stuff, they fall on my ears as kind of alapana in some way. And I think that helped me, even though I wasn't trained in Western music, I could like jam with my friends, and they're like, Roopa, how are you doing these cool trills? And it's because I did Sarigamapadanisa like 100 times. Right. And so I think there is some that direction too. And there's one more thing I wanted to say, which I can't remember now, but I'll come back to it.
Yeah? Okay. I guess for me, we all sort of grew up in the same sort of situation. My parents were both, music enthusiasts, and they would arrange concerts. And but I also grew up, listening to other kinds of music, and I actually learned piano for a long time, and that was something that was really important for me to connect with other kinds of music. And I, value that experience. And I mean, just like them, going to school and stuff, people knew that I played mridangam. They didn't know what it was, and I would disappear for a few weeks every year. Every December, I would be gone, and they're like, where'd she go, And then I come back, and then like people have different friends all of a sudden, and I was out of the loop.
That's so sad.
Oh, you don't know? She's not cool anymore. Things like that. So I was always, I felt like I was living this double life, going to India, but it was something I knew that I would, never regret. So I've always tried to, keep doing it, even if my friends didn't get it. And then eventually you make friends doing that. You eventually meet people like Arun and Roopa, and you have a new community of people. And so it's it's never been a disadvantage because we're all relating with the same circumstances and the same situation. And I think our music is informed by that experience, that hybrid experience of having to deal with both cultures. And yeah.
I know you guys. I know you guys are like all like loving music right now, but did you ever, when you're like,
Take them across.
but like when you were kids, did you ever have that moment where you're like, I just don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah. I used to hate practicing more than anything in the world. I mean, it took like a while. Like I started Indian music when I was like 11. And then by 14 is like the first time I think I practiced and actually liked it. Or I did it for myself. It took a while, which I think is necessary to some extent. Like, because no kid really is like, oh, I really love music and I know it from the start. Like, kids are kids and they don't really know it. And I was that kid who had no clue and really didn't like it. I was like, kind of hated it. And my mom would force me to practice, and I would. But then there, once you start making progress and you start doing better, then you realize that you do like it because you're good at something, and you're like, oh, that's nice. But music wasn't always that. We got there. Did you guys like music forever?
I think so.
Oh.
She's that person.
Yeah.
Practices on her own for 10 hours.
It was funny because actually, well, it's not that I didn't like music, but I didn't like Carnatic music for a little while. I was always sort of rebelling against it, and I was part of those kids who would run out in the hallway during the concerts and stuff like that. I was there, but I related to music in my own way. I used to like compose these little tunes in my head, and I loved doing that, and I would play them on piano. And I mean, I loved mridangam too, but obviously I think we all had the experience of having our parents, really come down on us hard for not practicing enough. And I mean, because we had no idea what was, we'd gone to Chennai, but we had no idea the sort of professional responsibilities that come with that and how much you have to practice, how far there is to go. And maybe around the time I was 12 or 13, I slowly started to realize, I didn't even probably realize how great my guru was, until that point. I was like, wow, there's so much out there. Until then you're just doing it, it's a hobby, you go to school, it's part of your daily life. But then you hit that point where you realize, oh my gosh, this is like such a wonderful thing to have in my life, and I think I'm going to spend time and dedicate myself to it. But it takes time to get to that point of maturity, and different people reach it at different stages.
How do you find teaching styles different in India versus here? Do the methods vary?
Yeah, so I would say the majority of my training happened in the U.S. With my teacher Ashwin in the Bay Area, and I think she really tried actually to create a learning environment that was similar to what a student in India might have had. So we had to wear salwar kameez or some Indian garb to class. We couldn't just show up in jeans, which I actually felt like helped kind of consecrate the space and make you feel like you're there for a reason that's different from what you were doing the hour before. So and she was pretty strict in terms of emphasis on shruti, emphasis on pronunciation, which I think are some things that people in India think we can't do, like they'll never pronounce the word right or they don't know the meaning. And I think she was actually quite particular about that, and that was helpful.
The diction was close to perfect.
Oh, I don't know about that. But thank you. Thanks, Ashanti. So I do think actually that I was fortunate to have that kind of sort of a traditional style of teaching. At the same time, though, she knew that in order to really win us over, she had to talk to us about when is prom, like are you stressed out with your tests? Like there was some amount of kind of getting to know the other side of us, which I think helped to make her a really effective teacher. And then in India, I learned from Suguna Varadachari Mami, and she's a great teacher as well. And actually over time, I've started to have a relationship with her that's also more kind of congenial, and she knows me really well now, and I'm very honest with her about, oh, Mommy, I went out last night, and I danced in the club, and then I came this morning to Pata class. Yeah, we do. And then we sing Todi, like anyone should sing Todi. So I feel like I have that nice rapport with her. Of course, it's taken time. That's not something I would have felt comfortable sharing with her the first class, but after a year or so, I felt like And I think that's probably true of any teacher-student relationship. Sort of at the beginning, it's unidirectional, and there's kind of a power structure there, and then over time, some of those walls start to come down. So it's hard for me to say one is Indian and one is not, but I think every relationship kind of has its own evolution.
It's good to hear that they're very sort of, there's no hard and fast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I also, I learned from Sri Anandakrishnan, who's a really great violinist in New Jersey, and my experience with him was similar to what Roopa was saying. I mean, it was actually a strict teacher, and strict in the sense that all, musically, he was strict about everything being perfect. So he worked me very, very hard, and we would go through exercises, and the way in India they would say that a taskmaster, a teacher, is going to make you do the same thing over and over again. Ananda Krishnan did that to some extent in the very beginning about making sure that everything was right, but it was so imperative to have that training and to get that foundation, which I think for any classical music, for our music, it's important to have a foundation, because if that's stable, then you might go in 20 directions as you get older. You might keep going this way or that way, and influences come, but that foundation is what keeps you grounded. It's what keeps you confident in your own music. And I think any great musician always has a really strong foundation. And I did have an experience of learning in New Jersey my whole life and getting that strong foundation, that strong training. And like Roopa, I also, and Rajna also, I studied in India under Mysore Manjunath and Mysore Nagaraj, who were two incredible violinists. And that was also, it was a different relationship there, but it was also because I was at a different place in my musical journey. I was more, it became more about, it was about improvisation, it was about emotion in music, it's about the colors of music, as opposed to the numbers of it, or, this is how you do this. It's more about a way of life. It became more about, just kind of the spiritual aspects of it. So, but it only got there because I was maybe ready for it at that time. Not every student can get that experience. You have to kind of get up to that point. And with Manjunath, I've had nothing but kind of incredible experiences learning with him. And again, it was the same kind of thing of like, we could talk about just about anything, because it became like a friendship. At first it was him definitely telling me it's going to be this way or it's going to be that way. But then when they see your interest and your dedication, and they trust your dedication to the art form and to really practicing it as a professional, taking it very seriously, then they're happy, they're okay, and then they can be who they want to be. And then, but when they're like that, we learn even more. There's so much you can learn just from the way they live their life. And that's something I think, I think we all have that to some extent. Growing up here, we've been able to be lucky to get that. But it's that foundation, that initial learning of the music and the structures of music that allowed us to get anywhere and to have those experiences.
Well, I guess for me, the situation was very different, since my guru came and stayed in our house in Maryland and taught me for a couple months at a time over a few years. And then I would go to India in the summers to learn more intensively with him.
Lucky you.
So I kind of had the best of both worlds, and he had to deal with me more than anything else. I would say, I can't come for class right now, I have homework. And he was very patient, which was remarkable. My mom would start, yelling at me, saying, like, how can you, say this to him? He's your guru and stuff. But then he was very patient. He was like, let her come on her own time, and she'll, develop the interest, and she'll realize soon. And learning from him in that atmosphere versus learning from him in India was so different, because he became part of our family when he was in Maryland. And then when I'd go to India, it was a different situation altogether, because all his other students were there, and it was different, because you couldn't be like you were in a family. It was all the students, and there was, a hierarchy and things like that. But overall, I think it was an amazing experience to get to learn from him. And the other thing is that my parents were also sort of my teachers along the way, because during the gaps of time when I didn't have lessons from Shivaraman sir, my dad would just sit with me and we'd listen to recordings in the car and just at home, and I would take notes, and he'd say, "Did you notice how he played that?" These are vintage recordings from the 60s and 70s of my guru, and we'd sit and have long conversations. My mom would sing like a couple hours every day for at least a couple years. We did that, and I would just accompany her, and that was my practice in learning how to accompany music. So it was, everybody in the community comes together and forms your musical foundation. Mm-hmm. So it's not just your guru. You have so many gurus. Other than your primary guru, you have, I feel like in some ways Roopa and Arun are my gurus, because I learn every time I perform with them. And the same thing happens when you work with Western musicians. Like right now, over the past couple of years, I've been working with a lot of jazz musicians, and some of them I definitely consider to be my gurus, because I learn what they know and I learn from their craft, and I grow as a musician because of that.
How do you think jazz has influenced your style and how you play with other Carnatic artists?
Well, I think, you can never separate yourself into two, forms of musicianship. It's all you. Your musicianship is this one core, and all these different influences are adding to that core, and that's going to enter into how you play in any situation. So my experience playing with Carnatic music has definitely come in handy when I'm trying to learn what the jazz musicians are doing. And then vice versa. There's a certain freedom that I've felt ever since I started playing in the jazz scene, just to learn that I could go out of some of the rigid boundaries of Carnatic music. It sort of freed up my mind to think about other ways to play within those boundaries. So even though I'm not really breaking the tradition, by leaving the tradition, I sort of understood different things that I could do within the tradition. So it's definitely just contributed to my perspective as a human being and as a musician.
There's a couple of other thoughts on that same question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's something about, so I haven't been like trained formally in any non-Indian music, but I've kind of through ear listening and stuff taken it on. And what I kind of like, I find I listen to a lot of pop music and R&B and soul and stuff. And what I like in that music is there's a strong personal quality to it and a storytelling aspect. And I feel like, at least in the way that I've been taught Carnatic music, that's absent. And it doesn't mean you need to have words and like a narrative arc, but I even think, even in some of the ways we do Kalpanaswara or Naraval or Ragam, there can be more of a personality than we're necessarily taught to be able to express. I think in a lot of our training in the pedagogy, we're so focused on, what are the core phrases? What phrases did the Vidwans of yesterday do that you have to incorporate if you're going to sing this raga? What sounds virtuosic, what doesn't? There's a lot of emphasis on what we think the audience is going to expect from us, as opposed to what comes naturally to you and what makes you feel good as an artist, which is, I think, kind of how there's that freedom to be more self-expressive, I think, in pop forms. And so whether I'm doing it consciously or not, I feel like that's something I want to try to bring into Carnatic music a little more.
Yeah, actually, with like knowing that Carnatic music isn't in English,
right.
That's probably not a language, like we all don't speak like whatever language is being sung in usually.
Yeah.
How does that affect your bhavam? Like how are you bringing in the expression and the feel of the music without really knowing? I mean, you know the...
No, that's a really good point. And I have to admit, I do not know the meanings of a lot of the songs I sing. I mean, I think probably most singers don't, to be honest, even in India. Part of the challenge is there's so many ragas we're singing, not ragas, languages, right? Telugu, Tamil, Kannada, Sanskrit, and others. But I think, the cool part of our music is that there is bhava in raga, right? And so, and there is some amount of just the vibration, I think, of certain words and syllables when you utter them. Something happens to you and you kind of go off that feeling. That's why a lot of the Sanskrit slokas they say to do as a meditative practice. Just the act of vocalizing some of those syllables can give you a certain kind of energy. I do think that's an issue, and I'm trying to be more conscious about learning lyrics and the meanings, and I think that will help me be a more kind of informed and artist who can communicate better with the audience. But right now, my primary source of bhava is just the musicality of it itself, and sort of the emotions I associate with certain ragas and the experiences I've had with certain ragas. So it has to be thought about. There's a lot of emphasis right now on supporting little children and kind of helping them realize their potential. It strikes me that there may be a little less for those who want to pursue it professionally in the U.S. So right now, if you want to do Carnatic music full time, you feel like you have to go live in Chennai and be part of the rat race there. And I would say that, and we're talking about advantages and disadvantages, that's a disadvantage if you're grown up here. You don't have necessarily the familial and community ties that you may have had if you grew up there. You don't know you don't know someone who knows someone who knows the sabha, the guy who runs the sabha.
The infrastructure is also not there.
Right.
I mean, there's only so many places you can play if you're going to do pure Carnatic music. So we have to find other ways to. That's also why we collaborate. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's sort of something that has to be developed more, which is venues that support and promote artists, and both in terms of just the creative process of developing art, but then also being able to perform. So I was part of a fellowship this last month called Indian Raga, and that's what they're trying to do essentially, is like support American-based artists who have sort of reached a certain level in Indian classical music and find ways that they can help them with the stuff that you don't want to do, but you kind of have to do to survive in the American market, like marketing and publicity and knowing how to talk to organizers and big venue concert halls. Like, how do you approach them? Like, does your resume that says you've performed in all these sabhas mean anything to them? So I think there's questions of like authenticity and almost like merit, I think, that come into play when you're trying to like make yourself a full-time musician here. That has to still be figured out.